Bonjour, Willy Mix, to compare today the CL1B by Softube to the hardware TubeTech CL1A, because we got two CL1As here in the studio. So the difference between CL1A and CL1B are minor. The CL1A is handmade point to point and has the tube on the outside and maybe I think a difference in the output transformer, but I'm not sure. And the CL1B is not that way, like the tubes are on the inside, so much harder to swap quickly. In the CL1A we got here, we had to change the tubes too, so that means that it won't sound the same as the plugin. Spoiler, it's not going to sound like the plugin. Also, two hardware can sound very different between each other. Like if I compare the two CL1A we got there, they're going to sound different. But why doing this comparison? To see if it's at least close, if it's in the same league. You know, it can be a bit darker, a bit slower and stuff like that. But is it similar? Is it a good emulation in that regard? First, I'm gonna say that it was very hard to match them. The release and the attack times seem to be quite different, so it was very hard to match. But I'll talk about this kind of stuff and the difference between plugin and hardware on my Instagram page if you want to see. I won't tell you to subscribe because you know what you do. I'm not here to tell you what to do, so do whatever you want. Anyway, let's jump right into it. First, on the bass track was recorded with a sub-kick microphone, so it got a lot of low end and it's quite slow. So let's try that right away. Frequency-wise, they seem very close, so it's a good point. But in terms of behavior, they are very different. It's hard to say one is better than the other because it would be unfair, but they are just different. Like the attack time and the release times kind of varies, and I already tried to change them before this video, try to match it as close as I could, but it was very hard to match. I'll try it with you here live so you can see. But yeah, there's always something that seems to be different anyway. So let's try on just one note to see if we can at least match it on one note. Yeah, you see they're quite close anyway. Yeah, maybe I noticed, and that's something that I already noticed in the studio, that the CL1A we got tend to suck up the low end a little bit, which is a good point here for the plugin because it doesn't. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, in terms of sound, they are quite close in that example. You can hear difference in the realism, in the mid-range, in my opinion, with the hardware, but it's up to you if it matters or not. The hardware is very expensive. Too expensive if you ask me, a bit too much for a mono compressor, even if it's very well made. But that's just my opinion, of course. But it's cool to have two in the studio anyway. I haven't paid for them, so pretty handy. Anyway, let's jump right to another setting, and it's something that I really like about the CL1B. It's a setting that I use when I'm mixing pop music in parallel on snare. It sounds like this. I will let you listen with and without the outboard, so the unprocessed and the processed sound. You see, it's pretty cool. It's just, you know, an annoying snare drum from Drum Machine. But it sounds super cool to use in parallel when mixing that kind of pop drum sound. I really like it. Is the plugin capable of doing something like that? Let's just check right away. So first, let's try with this setting. It should be like, I don't have any option to match it more here because it's in a fixed mode. Easy to set up. And so I cannot tweak it. It doesn't change if I tweak the attack and release, because fixed knob means fixed attack and release times. So let's compare right away. Yeah, so it's quite different. But you might say, oh, maybe it's because I'm clipping the converters going into the computer. And that's true. So let's see if I add some clipping from this guy, if it changed anything, if we get it any closer. Let's see. And it's still not the same, in my opinion. It's got a very nice snap on the hardware that I really like, and I really wish that the plugin had that, because it's maybe one of my favorite settings on the CL1A, except for vocal tracking, of course, and mixing. So let's give it a try to the CL1B Mkii. Maybe it's closer, just out of fairness. So let's give it a try and see if it gets any closer. It's actually not bad, in fact. I mean, it's still very different, but it seems a little bit closer to me, a little bit brighter. I don't know. Let's try to add the clipping in and see if it changes anything. Yeah, the clipping doesn't help. Also, maybe it's not really emulating the clipping of the converters, but that's not the question here. It's just to see if it was part of the sound and would make it super snappy, but not really, in fact. I mean, probably a little percentage of it. Anyway, it's not close, in my opinion. It's not sounding the same, and it's a shame because I love this setting. Anyway, let's jump right into a vocal track. I will just play the vocal track before. And comparing with the hardware, switching back and forth, and you will see it's quite different. So we'll just take one sentence and loop it after.
How do you feel when you know that your heart will stop when it's time to meet your loved ones? How do you feel when you know that the world is on the edge and barely limping on its wreckage? Is it worth fighting for flaws of humanity, leaning full to the end while burning a last chance? How do you feel when you know?
So it's very shitty vocals anyway, but it's here for the example. Let's just take one sentence and loop it and see if we can get any close and see if there is any differences.
When you know, 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 when you know.
Actually, it's quite close, and the difference here is quite similar to the differences I shown in my video comparing the GML EQ and the Plugin Alliance AMEC 200 EQ. It's just at the beginning of the sentence. Listen closely, I will try to.
When you know, when you know, when you know, when you...
You know, at the when you, like the very low beginning of the sentence, the hardware seems to have more information in the lows here. Let's listen back quickly and focus really on that beginning, that very low-end beginning of the sentence.
When you know, 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 when you know.
Yeah, it's super close though. I think that in that example, it's pretty good actually. It's pretty close, and since it's not sucking the lows, I might really enjoy having the plugin on my vocal track here. But let's finish this video by comparing on the overhead microphones, because I'm lucky to have at my disposal two units, two CL1As, so I can try on stereo material, which is not very common in terms of CL1Bs. Well, you don't always have two of them. You usually have one of these for tracking and vocal mixing. So it's a good example. I printed 3 examples of the drums: soft compression, medium compression, and hard compression. And let's start with soft version of it. I would just loop that and let's listen to it right away. Quite close actually. I think I prefer the hardware here. It's got more, it's like the low mids are filled, you know, it's hard to tell really, but it seems to have more low mids information in the snare and more low mids information in a kick also, which make it very pleasant on an overhead track like this. So yeah, I think I prefer the hardware. I will let you listen back to it. Now I give my opinion. You can listen back with my opinion in mind. Yeah, also it seems to have a different attack and release behavior, and it's expected anyway. But yeah, let's compare now on the medium compression, as I call it, but it's quite compressed actually. So let's compare now. Load the other plugin. This is the medium compression, fixed and manual time. So let's see. That's when it's getting tricky, because I'm having a very hard time to match here the sound, even if it's supposed to be the same. It's in a fixed manual mode. It's at the slowest ratio, so it shouldn't sound super duper compressed with just 1 or 2 dB of gain reduction on the V meter. And still it sounds very compressed in comparison to the hardware. Again, maybe my hardware is odd, and maybe the plugin is faithful, which would not surprise me in the end, because that hardware is quite old and it had traveled quite a lot. But anyway, it seems very different, much less natural, because it's more compressed too. So I would make you listen to it again, and I would try to, I don't know, match it, play with it a little bit to see. Yeah, now I try to match it, but it sounds more compressed on the hardware, because it is. So let's try to match it again. Yeah, I'm not being successful here. I just can't match it anyway. So let's now try one last time on the hard compression. It's very, very compressed. Listen to that. It's super intense, way too much, but it's here to compare anyway. It's not here to sound good. So let's compare with the plugin again one last time. The plugin seems a bit more open. It's hard to tell, but it seems a bit more open to me here. But also because the behavior is different. So yeah, it's different. Nothing else to say about that. So that was my video comparing the CL1A to the Softube CL1B. I know they are very different. I know it's not a scientific video anyway, but you can still give your opinion, tell me what you think about it. And I hope it will help you to know if the plugin you got is faithful, or if you need to buy the plugin if you got the hardware, because not everyone can have access to this super expensive piece of gear. I hope I'm here to help you in that case. And yeah, in the meantime, au revoir.